Seattle rain turned the windshield into a moving sheet of noise. Streetlights smeared into amber commas. The cabin of the Rolls-Royce stayed quiet, except for the soft hiss of wipers and Elena's unsteady breath. She sat in the passenger seat blazer, still on white blouse slightly wrinkled at the collar, like she had fought to keep herself together and lost. Her head leaned toward the cream leather. Above her, the starlight headliner looked like a private sky someone paid too much money for. "Kane," she murmured, voice stripped of boardroom steel. "Why is the world spinning?" I kept both hands on the wheel. My gray t-shirt was damp at the collar from the rain run to the garage. I wasn't dressed like a man who belonged in her world, and that was the point. Tonight, I was supposed to be invisible. "Water," I said. "Breathe. Keep your eyes closed." "I only had 2 glasses," she whispered, as if confessing. I remember the toast. Then, nothing. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. A black SUV had been behind us since the fundraiser lot. Same distance, same patience. I didn't say the thought out loud because saying it made it real. Someone tampered with her drink. Elena's lashes fluttered. "Are you angry?" I tightened my grip on the wheel until my palms burned. My gaze kept bouncing between the road and her reflection in the mirror, like I could hold her upright with attention alone. The leather on the steering wheel creaked under my fingers. "Not angry," I said. "Focused." A breathy sound left her half laugh, half broken. "You always sound like that when everything's on fire." The SUV stayed with us when I turned onto the darker streets. No GPS ping, no headlights flash, just presence. One mistake tonight, and Elena Marlowe, CEO Market Darling, the woman the city loved to worship and punish, would lose everything before sunrise. I was her executive assistant on paper, the kind that carried calendars, rerouted calls, smoothed tempers, and smiled at people who mistook proximity for power. In reality, I was the wall you didn't notice until you tried to walk through it. 2 years earlier, Elena had hired me after I caught a breach at her competitor during a contract gig. I didn't pitch myself. I walked into her office, set a printout of compromised credentials on her desk, and left before the receptionist could ask my name. She found me anyway. "Can you stop this from happening to me?" she asked that day. I'd answered by sliding a list of vulnerabilities across her table and letting my silence do the selling. Now her inner circle had names the city whispered like prayers. Julian Pike, CFO, charming enough to be dangerous. The board listened when he spoke because he sounded like stability. Marcus Vale, VP of Operations, the man who made the trains run on time. He smiled with his mouth and watched with his eyes. And then there was me, Kane Mercer, quiet in the hallway, not only in results. Tonight was a fundraiser with cameras, champagne, and a dozen ways to ruin a woman with one wrong photo. The SUV behind us felt like one of those ways. Elena's head rolled toward the window. Her breath fogged the glass. I forced my voice to stay steady. "Stay with me," I said. "Tell me something that's true." "True," her lips curved faint and exhausted. "You never drink at events. Not even when Julian offers." "That's true. You watch the room like you're counting exits." "That's also true." Her gaze drifted to my hands. "You're hurting the steering wheel." I loosened my grip by a fraction. The SUV behind us closed the gap. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Unknown number, no caller ID. I ignored it. The SUV's headlights flared, then dimmed. A signal, a warning, or both. I took the next turn without signaling, then another. The Rolls-Royce moved like a quiet weapon. The SUV followed anyway. Elena tried to sit up. The movement made her swallow hard. "Kane." "I think I'm going to lean toward the door," I said, calm like instructions in a fire drill. Window cracked. "You're fine." She did it. Obedient, not because she was weak, but because she trusted the part of me that never panicked. The SUV surged. Tires hissed on wet pavement. The gap vanished. I didn't accelerate. I didn't brake. I changed the battlefield. At the next intersection, I cut left into a service lane that ran behind a row of warehouses. The city lights fell away. The street narrowed. Puddles became shallow lakes. The SUV followed. Of course it did. I waited until the lane forked, then killed the headlights for 2 seconds, just long enough for darkness to swallow us. I swung right into a loading bay shadow and hit the brakes. The SUV shot past headlights, sweeping empty rain. I turned the lights back on. 1 breath, 2. Elena blinked, confused. What? Did you do? Bought us time, I said. Then the SUV's brake lights flared at the far end of the lane. Reverse lights flicked on. Time ended. I took Elena to the safest place I could reach without bringing attention to her address. The office. No paparazzi camped outside corporate headquarters at midnight. No neighbors watched. The building had my cameras, my locks, my server room. As we slid into the underground garage, Elena sagged against the seatbelt. I can walk, she murmured, pride fighting nausea. My jaw tightened. I parked, killed the engine, and looked at her. Up close, she didn't look drunk. She looked drugged, pupils unfocused, skin too pale, breathing shallow but regular. I stepped out, rounded the car, and opened her door. Rain slapped my shoulders. Cold ran down my neck. Kane, she started. I crouched, arms around my neck. She hesitated like a woman trying to preserve dignity with the last thread of strength. Then she lifted her hands and did it. When I stood, her weight settled against me, light but not weightless. Real, human, the kind of responsibility you couldn't delegate. I carried her through the garage entrance, badge beep soft and obedient, then into the elevator. Her cheek pressed to my shoulder. Her hair smelled like expensive shampoo and champagne she didn't deserve. The elevator rose. Numbers climbed. The building swallowed us. On the executive floor, I moved fast, past glass offices, past the quiet hum of servers behind walls. I took her into my small security annex plain couch, clean blankets, a mini fridge stocked with water and electrolyte packs, and a med kit I kept for reasons no one asked about. Elena tried to focus on my face. You're taking me to your office. Safer than your penthouse, I said. Her mouth twitched. Because you don't trust my security. I trust mine more, I corrected. Her eyes closed again. Her fingers curled in my shirt like she was holding the only stable object in a spinning room. While she fought for consciousness, I turned on the monitor wall. Camera feeds, garage, lobby, street. Nothing obvious. Then I opened the building's event archive footage from the fundraiser ballroom. It had been hosted in our own venue space downtown, wired into our security system for insurance compliance. Most people forgot those cameras existed. I didn't. Timestamp, 9:14 p.m. Champagne table. Elena appeared in frame, laughing at something Julian said, her posture perfect, her smile practiced. A server passed with a tray. Elena took a flute. Marcus entered frame from the left. He wasn't looking at Elena. He was looking at the glass. He paused at the table as if checking a place card. His hand dipped. Something small flashed between his fingers, too quick, too casual. He leaned over the flute for a heartbeat. Then Elena lifted the glass. I replayed it. Slower, frame by frame. A tiny tilt of Marcus's wrist, a drop that shouldn't be there. My throat went tight, not with fear spoken aloud, but with the kind of cold certainty that made your body lock into purpose. My eyes didn't leave the screen. My hands didn't stop moving as I bookmarked the clip, duplicated it, and pulled badge proximity logs for the exact minute Marcus stood at that table. The system gave me his badge ID. His device, Mac, his access token, clean as a signature. Behind me, Elena stirred. "Kane, what are you doing?" I didn't answer yet. I walked to the couch, lifted her chin gently with 2 fingers, checked her eyes, counted her breath. Then I held a bottle of water to her lips. "Sip." She obeyed again, then whispered, "Am I?" In trouble, I looked at her, and instead of saying what I felt, I set the blanket higher over her shoulders and then moved my body between her and the glass wall of my office, like a shield someone could photograph if they ever got close enough. "No," I said. "They are." She slept in fragments. Every time her breathing hitched, my attention snapped back to her like a tether. I didn't sit at my desk. I sat on the floor beside the couch, back against the cabinet, laptop on my knees, eyes rotating between Elena and the screens. At 1:07 a.m., her hand slid off the blanket. The fingers trembled like they didn't trust the air. I didn't take her hand. I didn't make it romantic. I did something better. I reached for the small pulse oximeter from the med kit, clipped it onto her finger, and watched the numbers stabilize. Then I set a silent timer for hydration and another for checks. By 2:30 a.m., her color came back in small increments. Her eyelids stopped fluttering. When she finally woke, it was slow and angry. She pushed herself upright, hair disheveled, mascara slightly smudged, and stared at my office like it had betrayed her by being real. "I'm in your bunker," she said. "Security annex," I corrected. I slid a bowl of plain soup toward her across the low table. It was the kind of emergency food I kept because outages happened, not because I expected to feed CEOs. She sniffed it. "Did you cook microwave?" I said. Her lips curved. "So you're not a miracle worker?" I didn't smile. I watched her hands. Steady enough to lift the spoon, that was progress. "What happened last night?" she asked, voice rough. I leaned forward and set my phone on the table between us, screen face down. "A choice, a boundary." "You remember the toast?" I said. "Yes." Then the room blurred. "Yes." "You weren't drunk," I said. "Not the way people get drunk." Elena went still. "Kane." I met her gaze. "Someone slipped something into your champagne." Her throat bobbed. "Who? I have suspicion. I'll get proof you can use." She looked at me for a long beat, eyes sharp now, despite the leftover haze. "You're certain?" I answered with action instead of reassurance. I opened my laptop, pulled up the still frame from the footage, and turned the screen toward her. Marcus's hand froze in mid-motion, hovering above her flute. Elena's face tightened. Not disbelief. Calculation. Rage contained so tightly, it looked like composure. "I knew he hated me," she said softly. "I didn't know he'd risk this." I watched her shoulders square. She was putting armor back on. "Phones," she said. "Do you have mine in the car?" I said. "I didn't want you waking up to headlines." Her eyes flicked to the monitors. "Is the board going to find out?" "They'll find out what I show them," I said. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "What are you, Kane?" I didn't answer with a resume. I answered by pulling up a network map, showing her the silent intrusion attempts that had been nibbling at our systems for weeks. A slow bleed. A sabotage designed to look like incompetence. Elena's jaw tightened. "Julian said the instability was because you were overhauling too much." "Julian says what benefits Julian," I replied. Her eyes narrowed. "And you let him." I lifted my shoulders, a small shrug that didn't reach my eyes. Sometimes you let a man talk until he thinks he's alone. By evening, Elena was clean, steady, and furious. The building was mostly empty. Glass corridors echoed. The city outside the windows glowed like wet neon. I ordered dinner to the office, not candlelight, not romance, just 2 containers of hot food and a stack of paper napkins. We ate in the security annex with the monitors watching the world on mute. Elena loosened her blazer and rolled her sleeves. If Julian and Marcus are involved, she said, why do it now? Because the board vote is tomorrow, I answered. She went still. The merger. Or the illusion of one, I said. Julian pushed that narrative hard. If you look unstable, the board votes for a temporary replacement. Temporary always becomes permanent. Elena's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. They'd destroy me with one photo. I didn't tell her the worst part. I showed her. I pulled up a folder labeled Media Risk and opened a still frame from a parking garage camera. It showed me carrying her in the rain, her arms around my neck, her face against my shoulder. It looked tender. It looked guilty. Elena stared at it until her knuckles went white around her fork. They already had a camera on us. Yes. And you? She swallowed. You carried me anyway. I didn't explain. I set my phone down beside the image, then slid it away like I was moving a weapon out of her reach. I did what kept you alive and out of a ditch, I said. Her eyes flicked to my face. Something shifted in her expression. Respect, yes, but also a dawning understanding that the quiet man in the hallway was not quiet because he had nothing to say. She spoke carefully. You knew they'd use it. I reached up and adjusted the cuff of a borrowed dress shirt I'd changed into earlier for a meeting, a uniform of a man who belonged in her world, even if he hated the costume. The fabric felt like a reminder. I'm your assistant, I said. Then I tapped the cuff once, as if testing whether it was bulletproof. That's the wall. It's clear. It's strong. It keeps people from asking the wrong questions. Elena's gaze held mine. And what about what you want? Consent lived in details. I didn't close the distance. I didn't trap her with my body. I simply held her look and let the silence invite her to step forward if she chose. Elena set her fork down. Slowly, deliberately. Then she reached across the table and touched my wrist, one finger-light contact, a question asked without words. Her voice was lower. If this ends tomorrow, I don't want to regret what we didn't say. My breath stayed even. Then say it. She leaned in first. When our mouths met, it wasn't soft. It was collision brief, controlled the kind of kiss that didn't beg. Her hand tightened at my wrist. My palm braced at the back of her neck, not forcing, just anchoring. She kissed back, steady choosing, and when she pulled away, her eyes were bright and clear. No mistakes tonight, I said. Elena's lips curved sharp and certain. Good. Because tomorrow, I'm going to burn them down. At 3:12 a.m., the building's security system went blind. The monitors flared, then collapsed into black tiles. The hum of servers shifted pitch. Somewhere deep in the floors below, a fan whined like a warning. Elena snapped awake from the nap she'd taken on the couch. What is that? An attack, I said. I didn't swear. I didn't shout. I moved. I grabbed my go-bag from the cabinet, flashlight, spare drive gloves, a small tool roll, and headed for the server room. Elena followed, shoes and hand hair pinned back like she was preparing for war. You should stay, I told her. She slid her heels on at the elevator. No. The elevator dropped us into the chilled lower level. The air down there tasted like metal and recycled cold. The server room door scanned my badge. It hesitated, a flicker of resistance, then opened. Inside, blue indicator lights blinked in patterns that felt wrong. Rows of machines stood like silent witnesses. I went straight to the security DVR rack. Someone had tried to purge the fundraiser footage. They'd scrubbed the index thinking that killed the video. It didn't. It just hid it. I jacked in, bypassed the damaged index, and pulled the raw file straight from disk sectors. The footage reappeared like a ghost dragged into daylight. Elena watched over my shoulder, breath tight. "Marcus," she whispered when the clip played again. "Yes," I said. A second file caught my eye, an access log spike at the exact time the CCTV index was altered. The user account wasn't mine. It wasn't IT's. It was Marcus's. And beneath that, a procurement record attached to his corporate card, a small, rushed purchase. At a late-night pharmacy, item description, redacted for health privacy, signed off with an override code the only operations could use. I didn't need the ingredient list. I needed the pattern. I opened the internal messaging archive. One message sat flagged by the system because it had been deleted too quickly. From Julian to Marcus, sent an hour before the toast. "Make sure she can't speak tonight. One photo is enough." Elena's hand covered her mouth. Her eyes didn't water. They hardened. "You have it," she said, voice shaking with controlled fury. "You have enough." "Not yet," I replied. I exported the footage, the badge logs, the access attempt, the deleted message, and the procurement record into a sealed evidence bundle with hash verification. If they tried to claim it was edited, the math would call them liars. Then I pulled my USB drive from the port and stared at it for a second. There was a time in my life when walking away was safer than staying. When leaving a fire meant survival. I didn't narrate the choice. I acted. I snapped the USB drive into a tamper-evident case, sealed it, and slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket. Then I locked the server rack behind a manual key override and pocketed the key. No more back doors. No more, maybe. No more pretending I worked for the job and not the woman. Elena's voice was quiet beside me. "Kane." I turned. She stepped closer, close enough that I could feel her warmth against the chilled air. She didn't touch me this time. She didn't have to. "I'm not asking you to save me," she said. "I'm asking you to stand with me." I nodded once. "Then we do it in the open." The boardroom smelled like polished wood and expensive fear. Glass walls framed the skyline. Rain still fell outside, but up here it looked like a distant problem. Men and women in tailored suits sat around the table like judges who wanted to be entertained. Elena sat at the head posture, perfect eyes calm. Julian sat 2 seats down, smiling, as if the world belonged to him. Marcus leaned back with a confident ease that made my hands itch. I stood behind Elena at first, just slightly off her shoulder, close enough to protect, far enough to respect her space. My suit jacket felt wrong on my body, but the stance was right. Julian began, voice warm. "We're concerned about leadership stability. The market is sensitive. The optics," he tapped a remote. A photo appeared on the screen. Me carrying Elena through the garage in the rain. Gasps, murmurs. The board leaned in like they'd been waiting for blood. Julian sighed, almost sympathetic. "This is not about private lives," he said. "It's about risk." "Elena, were you intoxicated at a public event? Were you compromised?" Elena's fingers didn't tremble. She didn't defend herself with emotion. She looked at me once. A silent green light. I stepped forward and placed a slim black drive on the table, not the USB itself, but the sealed evidence case. "Before we discuss optics," I said, voice even, "we should discuss facts." Julian's smile tightened. "And you are Elena," answered, clear as a gavel. "Kane Mercer, Acting Director of Security and Cyber Response." Julian blinked. Acting Elena didn't look away. "He's been acting for months, quietly, because someone was bleeding this company." A board member leaned forward. "Kane, do you have something relevant to the allegations?" I didn't point at Elena. I didn't speak for her. I spoke to the room. "Elena wasn't drunk," I said. Julian's eyebrows lifted. Come on. I turned the screen remote in my hand, once then clicked. The fundraiser's CCTV filled the screen. Elena at the champagne table. Marcus approaching, his hand dipping. The small tilt. The moment. I paused it on the exact frame. Then I let my words land like a verdict. She wasn't drunk, she was poisoned. Here's the footage of Marcus spiking her champagne. The room went silent in the way a courtroom goes silent when the lie breaks. Marcus's face shifted first. Not guilt, calculation, exit routes. Julian recovered faster laugh, too sharp. That's edited. I didn't argue. I clicked again. The screen split CCTV clip on the left, badge proximity log on the right, with Marcus's ID lighting up at the exact timestamp, then the security DVR access showing his account attempting to scrub the index. Then the deleted message flashed on the screen. Make sure she can't speak tonight. One photo is enough. Julian's smile died in place. A board member's voice was thin. Is that from our internal archive? Yes, I said. Recovered from the server room after someone tried to delete it at 3:12 a.m. Elena finally spoke, her voice quiet and lethal. You tried to drug me, photograph me, and remove me. For what, Julianne? Julianne leaned back, palms open, the performance starting. This is absurd. Marcus handles operations. I handle finance. Why would we? I clicked again. A ledger appeared, hidden accounts, shell vendors, bogus invoices tied to an infrastructure modernization project that never existed. Then market position reports that benefited from manufactured instability. You weren't just removing Elena, I said. You were engineering a failure, tanking confidence, and profiting off the dip. The board's faces shifted. Not outrage first, fear. Because fear meant they understood. Marcus stood abruptly. This is a witch hunt. I moved before he could step around the table. Not aggressive, just placed myself in his path, calm, solid, a wall with eyes. Sit, I said, not loud. Not pleading, just certain. Marcus hesitated, then sat, because even predators obey when they recognize someone who doesn't flinch. Julian's voice cracked. Elena, we can talk about this privately. Elena's gaze was ice. No. We talk here. Public, recorded. She looked to the board. I want an immediate vote. One member cleared his throat. Elena, the optics. Elena's smile was razor thin. The optics are that my CFO ordered my VP to poison me. The optics are felony fraud. The optics are prison. No one argued after that. Security arrived. Not Marcus's. Mine. Two men in plain suits stepped in and stood by the door. I'd called them before the meeting started, and the board finally understood that this wasn't theater. Julian's posture collapsed. Marcus's jaw clenched. As they were escorted out, Marcus hissed, "You're just her assistant." I leaned in slightly close enough that he could hear, not close enough to be dramatic. No, I said. I'm the reason you got caught. The building exhaled after the board cleared. The hallway felt wider. The lights felt less harsh. Elena stayed in the boardroom for a moment, after everyone left, hands on the table, shoulders finally dropping. I didn't touch her. I didn't narrate relief. I walked to the glass wall and checked the corridor through the reflection habit and vigilance refusing to turn off. Behind me, Elena's voice came out softer. They were going to end me. I turned. She looked tired now, not drugged, not weak, just human after battle. I stepped closer and held out my phone. Not a gift, a tool. Press record, I said. Say what you want the market to hear. We'll release it through official channels in an hour. You control the story. Elena took the phone, thumb hovering, and then she looked up. You always do that. Do what, give me the wheel, she said. Even when you could drive. I didn't respond with a compliment. I responded by nodding once approval without softness. Elena recorded a short statement, clean factual, no tears, no drama. An internal investigation, leadership continuity, evidence provided to law enforcement, zero tolerance. When she finished, she set the phone down and looked at me like she was deciding something. "Come with me," she said. To where? To the lobby, she answered. "I want people to see you beside me." We walked out together, no hiding, no whispered corners. Employees looked up from their desks, startled to see the CEO at this hour, and then they saw me at her side and understood that the quiet man in the hallway had a name. Respect wasn't declared. It was witnessed. A week later, the rain still fell, but the city felt different. Julian and Marcus were gone, lawyers' investigations headlines that no longer painted Elena as a scandal, but as a survivor of an internal coup. On Monday morning, Elena stood on the small stage in the atrium, sunlight breaking through clouds in pale sheets. Employees gathered. Cameras rolled, company cameras, not paparazzi. Elena took the microphone. "We're rebuilding trust," she said. "That starts with transparency and protection." Her gaze found mine in the front row. "I'm appointing Kane Mercer as head of cybersecurity and corporate security," she said, voice carrying. "Effective immediately, publicly, permanently." A ripple moved through the crowd. People turned, searched, recognized. I stepped up beside her, not behind. Elena handed me the second mic, then leaned close enough that only I could hear. "No more shadows," she murmured. I answered the crowd with simple words. "We'll harden every system," I said. "We'll audit every vendor. And no one will touch this company or its people without getting caught." Applause rose. Real, not polite. After, in the quiet of the executive floor, Elena stopped by the window and watched the city. So she said, turning, "Did we make a mistake?" I walked to her slow. I didn't corner her. I didn't ask. I placed my hand at her waist, safe, steady, and waited. Elena stepped into it on her own, a small, decisive movement that meant yes. Her forehead touched my chest for a moment, like she was letting herself be held without surrendering power. Then she looked up. "We did the right thing," she said. This time when I kissed her, it wasn't collision. It was calm. It was earned. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, everything finally held.